Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November 14th meeting of the CNY REMAC, 17:04.5. Usual housekeeping applies. Please speak up, please use the microphones, and identify yourself for the benefit of the transcriptionist. September 12th minutes were sent electronically, and I would like a motion for review, comment, acceptance, flat out denial. Any or all of the above. I see nods, but I got them for one. Two. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Unfortunately, there's a bit of sadness that I do have to mention tonight. Over the last quarter, Robert Bush is a Homer firefighter who lost his life during a training exercise. We lost Robert Fluck, NAVAC cornerstone for a couple decades. And Joan Darby, wife of our undersheriff, also lost her battle with cancer. So we would just ask that you keep them in your hearts and minds. On a substantially more upbeat note, I'd like to announce the New York State American College of Emergency Physicians Advancement in Emergency Care Award was awarded to and accepted by Dr. Christopher Fullakar. This is great. And for those that may not be aware, Dr. Fullakar has put in hours, days, months, and years on the collaborative protocols. So if you happen to see him in the hallway, a pat on the back would be good. Moving on, CNAC met on September 24th. And I'll try to condense it as best as possible. From the Bureau report, and the CIC and CLI exams are going to be all done online. And what they're going to be doing is moving to computer-based testing centers. So there are 29 of these scattered throughout the state. Basically, you can, I think there's one, I did my boards, North Syracuse, Mattydale, someplace. You can pay your money, go in, and get your tests. The on-site testing, which is currently being done, now the first quarter of 2020, this will go away. There will still be some traditional pen and paper testing available. Contact the Bureau for more information on that. The computer-based testing will offer a paper certificate available upon successful completion of the test. And according to Ryan Greenberg, this will allow you to go out and immediately seek employment. CME program has been updated and it's available on the website. They have reduced the hours that are required. Part of the CME program will include electronic charting, will be required in 2022. And so any agencies that are still doing paper and want to do electronic CME, then you will need to go to an electronic PCR. The state is looking into a free ePCR software. The Bridge program is ongoing, it's doing well. The second cohort has started. They expect registration for the next class soon. Ultimately, there will be one class in the fall and one class in the spring. Wadsworth, for those who are unfamiliar, is the agency involved with blood and blood products for EMS. There's a new application process online soon. They are working on emails or correspondence for those who wish to apply. Currently, each agency has to have a contract with each hospital. In the future, the regional program agency will have a contract with each hospital, and the agency would just need to have an agreement with the regional program agency. So that should cut the paperwork down by a lot. They're still looking at changes and discussions about regulations. Let's see here. Education, developing some new job descriptions for regional faculty. That's in the regional faculty work groups. They've been looking at the 2019 scope of practice from NHTSA, changes to end-tidal CO2 and venous blood sampling. These have been removed from New York State. Medical standard, New York City has tech. There's been some changes with some of the dosing of diazepam. BIOS providers on the hashtag team will be able to administer calcium glucagon eye flush for hydrofluoric acid with specific training. They're looking at additional locations for needle decompression of the chest. And they also are looking at the rescue medic protocols for very specific operations, long scene times, and with on-scene medical direction. This would include blood transfusions, tranexamic acid, and other unmentioned physician-specific procedures. Remedies, hospital remedies, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. It's down south. They were approved a demonstration project for nebulized sub-dose ketamine for trauma via a breath-actuated nebulizer. This would require informed consent, and they would have to transport to the closest trauma center. Collaborative protocols. Tylenol. Currently, it allows the treatment of children less than 60 days of age and less than 6 months of age for ibuprofen. This is a case where the greater and less than signs were inadvertently put in the wrong way. So it was changed to greater than 60 days and greater than 6 months respectively. They also added dosing calculations for acetaminophen, 160 milligrams per 5 cc concentrations. There's a clarification coming out on the heat emergencies. Apparently there's some vagueness to treating on the scene versus rapid transport. There was an unfortunate case, I think, in the North Country where it was used as an example, so look forward to that. Not having looked at a cyano kit in a long time, apparently there's a 250 milliliter glass ampule. Part 800, section 23 something says that you cannot have medications in glass vials greater than 249 milliliters. So the Bureau will look at that to find out if there would be an advisory letter or a legislative change. EMSC, we reported previously that the hemostatic gauze by the FDA is considered a medication, and therefore a nurse cannot administer it without a direct physician order. and that has been changed at the bureau level. So the letter was sent to the commissioner and to the Centers for School Health, and now the nurses can use the hemostatic gauze for that. A brief discussion about safe transporting PEDS patients. The fact that agencies need to have devices, policies, and should have a pediatric emergency care coordinator within the agency. Ryan Greenberg relayed the story of he and his 3-year-old child. His child had a seizure, carried him down to the ambulance, whereupon the ambulance said, "Here, have a seat on the stretcher." Then they strapped the child and Ryan Greenberg onto said stretcher and transported to the hospital. I'm hoping that the crew really didn't know who he was. There would be a twinge of embarrassment there, I think. There are multiple devices out, so to the agencies, if you're going to have some kind of pediatric inflatable car seat or a PEDS mate, etc., probably should get one. EMTs can now become EMTs at 17. However, in New York State, they can't legally sign documents, they can't legally apply for the EMT course, and they can't legally sign PCR. So the Bureau will be working with Legal Affairs to remedy that, and more to come at the next meeting. EMSC, bouncing backwards, there was a brief mention of the, oh, never mind, scratch that. And that was the gist of it. Okay. Enforcement, we have none? Wow. Okay. That's a first in a long time. Okay.
Usually the fall is our education events for different levels of providers. So the Fall EMS Teaching Day that was held at Krause on October 2nd. And that was a collaborative effort between Krause, St. Joseph's Hospital, Upstate, and Central New York EMS. There was 84 providers in attendance. We also held an instructor development workshop on October 12th. And we had 37 instructors present for that. There was lab instructors, coordinators. The key with that is the state requires every 3 years for that group to have 8 hours of continuing education. Now that they've changed some of the requirements, the 5 hours have to be qualified as instructor development. So we actually got the agenda approved, and that was a collaborative between Central New York, Krause, and Upstate as well, and it was very well received. It was a full day event, but it was a very good education opportunity. The Weinstein Pediatric Conference, that was on November 8th. There was over 30 providers present at that as well. We are going to be doing another survey in the spring to see what topics want to be covered for providers for also the spring and the fall teaching days for next year. Vital Signs was held in Buffalo this year, usually because it's on the far end of the state. They usually see a drop in attendance. For this year, there wasn't. It was very well attended. They expanded their search for the different speakers that spoke, and it was very well received. They added a sim lab as part of that, so there was 4 stations people could go through the sim lab. They also added a critical care track that was very well attended, so very good feedback. They also now have the EMS Memorial, which usually you have to go to Albany and May to see. They actually have a traveling memorial, so it's going to go around the state so people can actually see it. And it's very well done. So more on that. And let's see what else. We've got QI report. There's no open reports. We are actually looking into, we discussed an executive QI of changing the quarterly report so we can submit that electronically through our account with SurveyMonkey to make it more easier for agencies to submit, and then for the ongoing reporting as well. So we're gonna be changing that a little and making it a little easier for people to submit, get rid of the paper end of things. I'll cover Narcan and stroke when we get that in under old business.
I did neglect to read into the minutes the updated stroke center notifications that were sent out by the state. Albany as a comprehensive, Good Samaritan and West Islip comprehensive, NYU in Brooklyn comprehensive, NYU Tisch Hospital down in the city comprehensive, Montefiore comprehensive, Upstate University Hospital comprehensive. Okay. Committees. Introduce Dr. Bulldog.
Chris Bulldog here. I don't have a whole lot on the protocol committee from my end, other than the fact that there's a flurry of activity currently going on in regard to the process going forward in the future as far as updates to the protocols, and there's also going to be some work in regard to getting the rollouts a little bit more uniform across the state and organized.
Thank you. CQI we'll touch on when we get to stroke. Old business.
For the Narcan update, we are up to 100 agencies that are in the program. We're close to 160 agencies, so we're slowly getting compliance, having everybody involved in that. We held 4 trainings this quarter and 2 more are scheduled. The nice thing is the updated training that we're doing, it can be agencies that came on originally 3 years ago because the protocols changed, and now that we have the nasal sprays. So for the physicians in the room, if your agencies, especially the BLS first response, aren't involved, please have them call us, because we still are able to train and provide the kits free of charge for those agencies. The other thing, with the updated BLS protocol, that's a good opportunity not only to get trained on the Narcan, but on the new protocol that goes with that. So if an agency hasn't had the training in a while, we can also do the repeats of that. And speaking of the BLS protocol update, as of the beginning of October, they had 11,000 people that have completed the BLS update, which is almost double from what it was in September. And that timeline for everybody to complete that is 12/31/19. One of the keys is we're going to send out another reminder. Every provider, whether you're an EMT, LWIP, paramedic, has to have that update as part of your recertification. So that's a difference than we had before. So we'll be anxiously awaiting everybody's completion.
Okay. Any old business other than what we've mentioned?
Stroke. So the EMS stroke pilot program that we're involved in with the Coverdale program, which is funded by the CDC, we have, by 12/31, all agencies have to comply with NEPSIS 3. The nice thing about being involved with this project, we were one of the first tri-region, mid-state, central New York, and North Country to get everything onto NEPSIS 3. So right now, we only have one more agency that has to transition from Zoll and one more for ESO. So we should be able to meet the deadline that the state has put into place. And then, of course, they're already working, we know NEPSIS is already working on the new version. And there will be another process that the state is working on, any updates to their validation rules, which are contained in, it's called the schematron. There's going to be a more structured process for that, so that agencies are well aware of it, vendors are well aware of that, and there's more feedback from the entire state as that progress, because this has been a huge undertaking to get, over 2,000 agencies transition. And we know now as a requirement, if you're going to be in the state CME recertification program, that you have to be electronic. That's going to even put more emphasis on moving to an electronic platform for patient care reports.
that way.
Yep.
So now we can move to new business.
RSI list is running around.
So circulated
First,
amongst the
we have
docs.
RSI, we have 2 agencies, Waves with 3 providers and Mentor with 1 provider. And
We've circulated it
it has
already.
been circulated.
And actually, we've got Waves with 4 providers and Mentor with 1.
And these have all met the minimum basic requirements to enter the training
Yes.
program. And this does require approval by the REMAC. So if someone would like to make a motion to approve said persons, Zagano, second. Worth, all in favor? Deny, disagree, I'm not liking that. Disapproval. Okay. Abstain? Anybody? So that's passed. Comes close. Okay.
Part of new business is our stroke severity tool. Last meeting, we had a discussion on FAST-ED, the possible pilot study that we were gonna do in the Susquehanna, North Country, and Central New York regions. Dr. Drolleman had another commitment today, so he was not able to come here since he is in charge of that subcommittee on UI studies. So he asked me to read into record his opinion on this. So even though there's not a clear superior stroke severity score, the FAST-ED may bring some value to the patients in our regions. We have seen significant delays in receiving patients that qualify for endovascular rescue. They were brought by EMS initially to another hospital, then needed transferred to a neuroendovascular capable center. There was a recent study looking at field triage in similar sized cities with similar stroke services. The patients that were triaged to the endovascular capable center had a significant decrease in process time from first EMS contact to the comparison to the patients that started at a non-endovascular capable center, required transfer to 1. The interesting piece that it is only 8 minutes more added to the transport time for the patients that were treated to the endovascular capable center and bypassing the closest center that was not endovascular capable. We do not know what we don't know. We do know that if FAST-ED will help in the future, Central New York EMS to direct stroke patients to the most appropriate designation sooner. Similar to what we do for trauma. We do know that time is extremely important for the stroke patient. It is probably worth the effort of a pilot study to investigate the potential benefit of the FAST-ED being done by EMS for our patients in the region. Josh Onion is here as well as our other comprehensive center. And they would like to do a short presentation and have the experts here to ask questions since we didn't have everybody present the last time we discussed this.
And I do want to introduce Dr. LaTorre. For those of you who don't know him, expert, like the most knowledgeable guy in the world. He's also very approachable and smiles a lot. So feel free to bug him. I haven't seen him in a couple of years, so he's a good guy. Okay, onward.
Thanks for giving us a few minutes to speak to this.
This is where you get to see all your mail?
Look through it, sure.
Excellent.
but like Dr. Gerolman mentioned in his message, we don't know what we don't know, but we do know that we have patients that are actually affected by lacking stroke severity scale. So Oksana and myself, representing the two comprehensive centers in Syracuse, kind of just like to show this group what we're feeling on our end from the hospital side. We did invite Bernadette Medby from St. Joseph's as primary stroke center representation, since she's unable to come. But let's just look at, from upstate, I have 3 cases to kind of take the group through, and we can look to see how care changes. So I'm first going to take you through the care of Mr. Alpha. He is an 85-year-old gentleman coming to a primary stroke center locally at 8:30 in the morning. He arrives in the emergency department. He's got right-sided weakness, a left gaze preference. He's not talking. It looks like a stroke to me. So his last known well is 3 in the morning. There's little that we can do with IV TPA, but there's probably something that we can do with thrombectomy. He waits in the ED for about 3 hours. I'm not exactly sure why, but we know that time is of the essence for stroke patients. So you can see that 183 minutes has elapsed since this gentleman arrived in the ED. Our docs get called 246 minutes into his care at the primary stroke center and suggested the patient go to our ED for stabilization, as his CT show that he has an M1 occlusion and his level of consciousness is decreasing. His stroke is getting bigger. We're not acknowledging that yet. About 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we're at 270 minutes roughly from his arrival to a primary center. Our docs receive the call and accept the patient for transfer. Lots of moving pieces for these strokes arriving at primary stroke center EDs. At 1:18, EMS is notified for an inter-facility transport request, and at 2:04, the patient is transported out of the primary stroke center. 361 minutes after that, the patient arrives in Syracuse at our hospital, receives an additional CT angiogram and perfusion because so much time has lapsed since his arrival to the stroke center. We do see that he has a left M1 occlusion, and it remains there, so he's favorable for thrombectomy. After 3:08, the patient arrives in our interventional suite. This is almost 400 minutes after he arrived in the first ED. We initially have difficulty obtaining femoral access on him. We eventually are able to make puncture. At 5:08 p.m., 473 minutes after arrival to the initial hospital, we're able to make some reperfusion on this gentleman, although poor. This is almost 8 hours after initial assessment at the primary stroke center. This patient eventually expired. He had a poor prognosis, and his family opted for comfort care. Mr. Beta, a little similar scenario. We can see a little bit different coordination of care here. At 3:30 in the morning, he goes to a different primary stroke center with the symptoms listed here: right-sided weakness, facial droop, and severe aphasia. Again, looks like a stroke. CT angiogram suggested of acute stroke with large vessel occlusion. He gets IV TPA and is transferred to thrombectomy center is indicated for mechanical thrombectomy. 212 minutes after that, the patient is actually transferred out of the primary stroke center and transported to Syracuse for thrombectomy. Arrives to our ICU as a direct admission 250 minutes after initial contact. Gets an additional CT angiogram confirming the left MC occlusion is still present. 5:15 in the morning, arrives in the interventional suite for thrombectomy, and at about 6:30 in the morning, he receives a moderate cerebral reperfusion after his procedure, which is almost 6 hours after initial contact at the primary stroke center. His outcome was better. He was discharged a few days later to rehab. I have to give you some good with some bad. So we can look at Mrs. Church. We can see how EMS was able to recognize additional assessment findings, convey them to our hospital, and the care was exponentially better. So this Mrs. Church at 11:15, she was at church, just worked out that way, and she lost consciousness. EMS is notified and arrives at the scene within 6 minutes, and this is from their note. They acknowledge that she does not recognize her own parts of her body, aka denial, part of the fast ED stroke assessment or any advanced stroke assessment. So EMS provides advanced notification to our hospital within 17 minutes, including an ETA, as well as advanced assessment findings. We're able to use this information to activate our stroke page at 11:34, 19 minutes after the patient loses consciousness at church. She gets to our ED a little after noon, within 46 minutes of her symptom onset. This is pretty quick for time is brain. Our neuro team and ED doctor meets the patient. We get a CT angiogram, which which we're able to expedite because EMS findings and this notification that went through. The patient is deemed a candidate for mechanical thrombectomy as well as TPA, which they receive within 65 minutes of onset. Alteplase is administered within 70 minutes, and the patient goes to our IR suite. We're able to obtain groin access and completely reperfuse this woman's brain within 136 minutes. This is just a little over 2 hours after her symptom onset at church. So, good outcome there. You can kind of see how that communication definitely helped this Mrs. Church. She was able to go home the next day. This is just the last example. We are working with our friends in the North Country as well. So a collaborative with LifeNet and Lewis County Search and Rescue using a FAST-ED stroke assessment scale. They're able to identify a right gaze preference in this patient, expediter care with Brown Air and Air Medical. We give the patient TPA within 30 minutes and get her to IR within 40, all because they noticed that the patient had a FAST-ED score of 4 indicating large vessel occlusion. So before picture, and we were able to reproduce this area. So this is just an example of feedback that we send to agencies that are using it. So a couple examples from me on how this actually is affecting patient care. And I will pass the baton to Oksana. Got to do a little bend for that one.
Hello, everybody. So I actually took a couple cases that we recently had where the patient presented with a gaze preference that was picked up by EMS, and that definitely activated our stroke team, and these patients had great outcomes because of all the teams that were activated. So we had a patient that was 75 years old that presented with aphasia, left gaze preference, and right hemiplegia. The initial NIH was 25 on arrival. So when the patient got here, we did advanced imaging. We saw that this patient needed intervention. The patient went got TPA within 30 minutes of arrival, and door to groin puncture was within 91 minutes, which is phenomenal. So I'm not going to read through this, but the patient had an NIH of 4 at discharge, so huge improvement. So we had another case where the patient was a 66-year-old female, presented with a right gaze preference, left-sided weakness, difficulty communicating, and slurring of her words. Initial NIH on arrival was 12. EMS picked up on those symptoms. We activated our stroke team, and the patient got TPA within 27 minutes of arrival, and door to groin puncture was within 104 minutes. And the patient was discharged with a left upper extremity slight weakness and a very subtle left side facial droop, which is significant improvement from when the patient arrived. And just a very recent case, we had a 77-year-old male came in with sudden onset of aphasia, left gaze preference, and a right hemiplegia. Initial NIH was 25, and this patient had a large vessel occlusion at the left MCA. This patient got TPA quickly, 25 minutes. A lot has to happen in that time frame, so those are phenomenal times. And door to groin puncture was 73 minutes. And this patient was discharged to acute rehab with significant improvement in symptoms.
So just 7 case scenarios from your 2 comprehensive centers of how a stroke severity scale can or cannot impact patient care. So we're here as collaborative stroke coordinators to talk to the REMAC and discuss the need for a stroke severity scale in our region. Our sister brother regions, I guess, to the north are willing to accept a stroke severity scale, specifically FAST-ED, and they would like us as a Central New York region to consider and adopt one as well for the care of our patients. So, brought Dr. Latore, as Dr. Olson said, to talk about his viewpoint on that, and Evan Belanger from Krause is here as well. So I guess if we can open up conversation, that would be okay. So any thoughts?
Thank you very much for having us here. I think we have 2 main questions. Why is a pre-hospital a stroke scale, a new or a different stroke scale necessary when we already have one. And second is which type of, which tool do we need? Because there's a lot of tools we have. To answer the first one, I think this pre-hospital scale is an improvement to what we already have. It identifies patients who might benefit from intervention other than the TPA. And because this type of intervention is only available in selected receiving facility, being able to identify these patients before they arrive to the receiving facility, being able to identify these patients so that they can be transported to the appropriate receiving facility are the two things that can happen that will allow these patients to have potentially a better outcome. The best chance for expedited treatment for this patient is to be transported to the appropriate receiving facility. There have been a number of studies, and the most recent one, as Dr. Lemon has mentioned, reported that for every 30-minute delay in a patient getting to the thrombectomy capable center, there's a 10% decline in their chance of outcome. We just reviewed our 2018 data for what we call a door-in, door-out for patients who come in initially from a different facility, and then the patient brought to the receiving facility. And in the best case scenario, the fastest that these facilities are able to transport patient to another facility is about 130 to 140 minutes from the time that the patient enters that facility. So that's about four or five 30-minute kind of like block, which means that by the time the patient arrives to the receiving facility and the thrombectomy to be performed, you actually have lost as much as 40 to 50% of the patient's chance of a good outcome. In another study, the transferring a patient to a primary stress center or to a non-thrombectomy capable center before transferring them to a thrombectomy capable center, if they are having a large vessel occlusion, the average delay for door to recanalization is anywhere from 70 to 90 minutes. And as we have been telling in our previous kind of like public education, for every minute of delay, about 2 million cells die. And the longer the delay in the treatment, the higher the chances of poor outcome for these patients, and, which have been illustrated in some of the cases that have been presented. Now, the second question is why fast ED? Why not the other scores or tools? Well, as you probably know, there's no perfect tool. There's no perfect pre-hospital tool. Most of the available tools have similar sensitivity and specificity in identifying patients who might have a large vessel occlusion. We currently use the fast ED, and we advocate for the fast ED because it has a sensitivity ranging between 60 to 70%, a specificity of about 80 to 90%, which means that if it is negative, your negative predictive value is close to 100%, which means that if the patient does not have a gaze preference or a neglect, okay, the chances of this patient having a large vessel occlusion is very, very low, which means that these are patients who might be more appropriate to be in either a stroke ready hospital or a TPA capable hospital. But if their score is anywhere from 4 or higher for the fast ED, their chance of having a large vessel occlusion approaches 60 to 70%. And if they in fact have that, their best chance of a good outcome is to be at a thrombectomy capable center as fast as possible, similar to what we now do for trauma. If they are suffering from a level level 1 trauma center. So we're here to advocate for this, and I think one of the other thing that I have noticed, as Joseph mentioned, is this is being done by our EMTs already. Okay, they are adding to what they already have, and it would be good, would it be good to have an acceptable regional tool that we can then uniformly train our providers, so that we can also assess for competence. We can also measure our ability to do it and do it well, because as simple as this tool, it also requires some competence for this to be kind of like done regularly. So that's my thing.
I will after you're done. Go.
I'm Evan Belanger. I'm the Director of Neurosciences at Krause Hospital, as well as the Comprehensive Stroke Center and Intensive Care, along with Dave Landsberg, our Medical Director back there. So I want to concur with Dr. Vittori's point in that consistency, right, and is key in this scenario. It's all about the reliability and the validity of the tool. And to be honest with you, none of the tools are perfect. But if you use one of them consistently, that's very helpful, both to the EMS agencies as well as to the hospital. So I agree in that we can advocate that if we all use the same tool, we all know the same language, right? So that when you're coming in and we have a consistent scenario of knowing the severity of that stroke and that time is brain, then we can all be on the same page on how this patient's outcomes will be reflected. We see that in our case studies, that the sooner you're there and as soon as the EMS agencies know the severity of that patient's situation. And we all know you guys know that, and it's easy to be at the bedside and know there's something wrong, but to quantify that and to give it to the stroke centers, that's a really important thing. Thank you.
Yeah, Chris over here. Thank you very much for all you guys for coming out here today. I appreciate it. I'll give you just a little bit of context from the protocol discussions that we've had in regard to this. As somebody who cannot spare an additional 2 million brain cells, I'm very sensitive to what's being discussed here today. In regard to the protocols, there is the provision for the region to designate particular stroke severity scores for use by the pre-hospital providers. There is a baseline across the state at this point that all providers will at the very least be utilizing the Cincinnati Stroke Score. We are all acutely aware of the limitations of the Cincinnati Stroke Score and the potential need for something else. The reason why there hasn't been something that's been uniform across the state at this point is because it's remarkable at this point the differences amongst the different regions as far as the opinions of what should be used as well as the strength of those opinions. So we have left it open to the individual REMACs to determine what can be used within within their regions in addition to the Cincinnati Stroke Score. It certainly is within the purview of this body in order to designate either a CQI or research study or designate the use of the stroke score in the region.
What's the ultimate goal of this? Are we looking to have particularly outlying agencies bypass primary stroke centers and transit transport from a longer distance to a comprehensive stroke center. Is that where we think this is headed?
Speaking to the Department of Health's perspective on this, I think that is exactly where that's headed. That they want primary stroke centers to be affiliated in some way or fashion with a comprehensive stroke center. So what that means for EMS agencies is, I mean, I don't know if it means bypass. You know, I think that every situation is different, but that we know that the sooner you're at a comprehensive stroke center, whether it be upstate or Crouse, the better the outcome of the patient. And that's reflected in these case studies. And then the consistency in the tool, knowing, do you go from a TPA capable center to a thrombectomy capable center? That fast ED score and the consistency of that score is what can decide that for you, right? I mean, I don't want to say an NIH of 2 is nothing if it's all speech, right? I mean, that's an eloquent brain problem. But you know, and that's the problem with these scores, is that you can have a low score based on the fact that you only hit a couple items. But what are those items? And is that eloquent brain? And what is the time frequency there? And you know, then you bring in the posterior circulation strokes that are a whole nother issue, right? Those are very easily misdiagnosed by ourselves as well as you guys. So, but I think that to your point is that it's not that we need to phase out primary stroke centers. In fact, we need more hands involved. But at what point do you just go down the road to the comprehensive stroke center?
So to kind of answer your question too, is that one of the issues is that the Department of Health is not a homogeneous organization. So what is currently being done on the stroke side of things hasn't exactly trickled over to pre-hospital care. With that being said, I think we are sort of going along the lines, if you will, of trauma, for example, where you know, I think it's becoming pretty clear that certain patients will do better. They're transported to a facility who can care for them definitively within a designated period of time. So in order to sort of bridge that gap between what's being done in the Department of Health in the stroke realm and the pre-hospital realm, within the protocols, it's pretty clear that med control can kind of take that gap. So if we have information, like if we have a particular stroke severity tool that is being agreed upon by our regional comprehensive stroke centers, that information can be relayed to med control, and then a decision can be made as far as within the region, should that particular patient be transported to a comprehensive center versus a closer facility. So while the details haven't been completely fleshed out, this is kind of what we have in the interim until we get more definitive guidance from the Department of Health.
So I could second support Dr. Fuller's comments that the discussion, although I tried to find notes for the last year and a half of CMAC meetings, the last time these scores were discussed, it was somewhat spirited as to what do we do with these. And it just kind of got left in the dust a little bit. I think that what we would have to do, we have a plan. We're looking at the past ED, right? So we have a plan to evaluate that.
Well, what was discussed at the last meeting was doing the study along with the Susquehanna North Country region. And our region, as well as Mid-State and Central New York, are taking a more active role in stroke because of the EMS stroke pilot that we're involved in, and the Coverdale grant with the Department of Health and CDC. So we are more involved with that and what is going on, you know, nationwide, but also with the hospital side of the Department of Health because of that. So the fact that we have collaboration with the hospitals, I can tell you, meeting with the CDC last December, they were very pleased with the collaboration of EMS and the hospitals that's going on with this project and what we're doing. That's unusual across the country, so to have that involvement sitting here in this room is very important and was recognized. So when I talked to Dr. Drolleman, since we've done other studies in this region, I know the IRB was asked, he said that if the REMAC agrees to do this study, that it would be contingent upon IRB approval at the hospitals involved, similar to what we did when we did the STEMI study. Instead of going through all that IRB approval first, and then the study doesn't get approved, the study, that would be contingent on that. So he wanted to make that very clear, and I asked him about that, and I knew he wasn't going to be able to at this meeting.
So I think what I'm trying to get at is that if we're going to go ahead and do that which is different from everybody else in the state, we sort of need to have our ducks all in a row. And I think that's sort of the direction we're moving in. So I think we need Dr. Jerome and Al to kind of get things going with IRB and the rest of it to move forward.
I was just going to say, independent of the study and the IRB, it's pretty clear that we need some assessment tool beyond the Cincinnati stroke score. It's been left up to the individual regions as to which particular tool is going to be used. If we have a fairly good consensus amongst our docs here, I would suggest that we develop the FAST ED to be used in addition to the Cincinnati score, and start implementing that independent of this particular study that we're talking about.
So is that something you'd like to make a motion for?
I'm putting it out for discussion.
Okay.
Dr. Porter, you mentioned going through medical control and using that for the outlying hospitals or outlying ambulances that are using the local community hospitals. What does that mean for them for medical control? Because they don't typically use resource as a primary. So how would we be looking at doing that?
Well, I mean, the resource at University is designated as the resource hospital for the entire region, so they can call resource if they so choose. According to what we currently have in the protocol guidelines, that as far as triage of a stroke patient to centers with endovascular capabilities, that is left up to local and regional guidelines. At this point, it is left up, we do have the option of using med control, and that would be something for discussion as far as if the outlying facilities want to have a way to go through a resource, or if they develop that through their own more local facilities, especially if they have a primary stroke center there, to have that discussion first. So that's.
Yeah, that would be, I think, my concern, just because the areas I deal with are the rural areas, that we put the scale in, and then those patients can't avail those services because we have a disconnect in those pieces.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I do think that these are two separate but contingent discussions, in that we can still do the assessment tool because we already have an assessment tool. It's an imperfect assessment tool. We have the potential to use a less imperfect assessment tool in addition to that to gain more information in order to help to triage those patients. Exactly what we do with that information, I think, is an important discussion, but something that I think is not core to whether or not we implement this tool.
So, Dave Landsberg, ICU EMS Institute. What teeth do we have as a region? Like, where are we going? Can we tell our paramedics, like trauma diversion criteria, that they, can we ultimately say you must? Or what are we, how far can we go? Yes? Okay, because I think that's important.
And
I have more.
we had that when we ended up with PCIs, so there was no designations for our STEMI patients, and we were able to put into the protocol very specific criteria to bypass a local hospital to do that. And I think that the nice thing is the way the protocols are written, it can be a regionally approved scale. So if the REMAC says, you know what, we don't want to study, we want to go with this stroke severity tool, they can, and you voted on it, and it would be region-wide. So you have the authority to do that. It depends on what steps do you want to take. Study first, and then go into a different tool. And as long as it's an additional tool, it is truly up to this body, as long as we look at it and then roll it out with the proper education and training that the entire region could use that.
So tool, but defining destination and holding them to that.
As far as the teeth go, to answer your question, this is something that's currently codified in the protocol. It's been approved by the CMAC, it's gone to the SEMSCO, and it's been endorsed by the commissioner. And that a language in there does impart to the regions to, and it directs the providers by protocol to follow any local or regional guidance in regard to that. So my argument would be that this is kind of where the strings behind the words come in, and it certainly gives us the ability to put that out there for our region.
Because we have to have that, otherwise we're wrong.
So that's my interpretation. Do you concur?
I would just be cautious.
It's going to be a heavy lift. There's going to be a lot of resources involved. We're going to be sending ambulances an hour outside of their district for prolonged periods of time. We're going to be bypassing hospitals that are going to be pissed off. And this is not going to be small. And we better make sure we're ready for the volume we're going to get. I mean, if we decide that 2 hospitals want every single stroke in this region, be careful.
So I think that's.
I'm just thinking with both hats on. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where the value of this tool can really play out. We don't want all stroke patients to be concentrated in the 2 comprehensive stroke centers that we have. What we actually want is for stroke patients to be treated where they are and to be treated appropriately for the type of stroke that they have. And so if we have a pre-hospital stroke scale that can, with some degree of certainty, identify them as needing a service that can only be done in these 2 hospitals, then that would be kind of like a triage tool that can allow patients who are more likely to benefit from such intervention. And then those patients, I mean, to put in perspective, there's only during the validation of this tool, of the patients who are eligible for the TPA, only less than 10% of patients were identified to have a large vessel occlusion. And so these are not a big number of patients. About 10% in patients who are within that time window for TPA, which means that 90% of patients could readily be taken care of locally in stroke-ready hospitals, in hospitals where TPA can be given appropriately. But of those 10% who might benefit from additional intervention, their best chance of getting better from this stroke is for them to be transported as fast as possible to the thrombectomy emergency. And I think the large vessel occlusion tool can help us at least identify some of these patients who might benefit from being transported directly.
Yeah, I certainly don't disagree. Of course I don't. That said, I don't want this to go, back with my EMS hat on, I don't want this to go the way of targeted temperature management in the field. I said it was useless in the beginning, I didn't think we should do it, it was a huge diversion, and we gotta get every patient to 4 degrees Celsius, you know what, keep the ET tube in. And for a 10% population, what I saw from a lot of what we just presented up there is other EDs that are getting it wrong. Meaning for me, if we could expeditiously have a physician recognize reliably that, oh man, this is the patient I gotta send, and have them get right back out the door on a drip and ship, I'm not so sure that's worse care than having my paramedics make a decision. And I'm fine with the paramedics making a decision. I just want to make sure for all this time and effort and resources and everything we're going to pour into this, are we taking care of the right problem? That's all.
Dave, I'm going to have a slight contrarian view,
Of course.
even as your colleague directly. You know, I once heard a stroke being described as a gunshot wound to the brain you can reverse, right? So and I'm just putting this out there as devil's advocate, would you stop with the trauma at a small community hospital to put a couple, you know, gauze pads on and then send them back out? I mean, that's a question for the room.
Hemorrhagic shock and a 12-hour window for LVO, not common.
Sure.
Right.
So,
Sure.
I just want to sort of temper a little bit about what we're discussing here. I think that these are very, very good points here. I just want to focus a little bit on what it is that we're trying to accomplish right now today. I don't think that we're going to be able within the next 30 minutes to outline a regional-wide stroke transport plan. But I think what we're trying to do is to help to better identify patients in the pre-hospital environment who otherwise would not be identifiable based upon the limitations of the current stroke score that we currently have. So by adding the FAST ED score, this is just going to add another level to allow for greater information to be discussed with med control. We already know that the importance of stroke has been defined over the last few years, and I think that is very clear to the outlying EDs. I think it's very clear to the pre-hospital providers, and having something that perhaps could tip off those outlying EDs who are getting it wrong to the fact that there's somebody who's coming in who otherwise might not have been readily identified. I think that's probably what we're trying to accomplish here. Again, the reason why a ubiquitous stroke score across the state had not been defined is because of the differing opinions. But I think we were all in conceptual agreement that there needs to be something more than the Cincinnati. Whatever that particular thing is up to the regions. And I think that at this particular point, I would be comfortable in saying that for our region, that next level out of all of the choices is the FAST ED, and then we can develop exactly what we're going to do from there in conjunction with the Department of Health when further guidance comes over to the pre-hospital side as far as where exactly these patients go. At this point, this is going to be just another layer on top of the pre-hospital to discuss with the receiving institution, and whatever it is that institution in conjunction with the tertiary care centers decide as far as the best place for that patient at that time is no different than what we're currently doing now.
Second the motion.
I agree with where I think this discussion is headed. I think it's miraculous that we have two hospitals agreeing on the same stroke scale, and I think we should take that run with it. My concern and my caution is that as soon as you put an assessment out there, a tool, without the appropriate guidance for how to use that, you leave a vacuum in which providers are going to make their own interpretation and their own decisions about how that tool should be used. So if we put this assessment out there without clear direction on what the value, what the assessment means and what it means to patient care and how that should drive patient care, we're going to end up with some providers diverting an hour. Maybe based on good information or bad information, other providers not trying to have this discussion with outlying hospitals that may or may not know why they're calling, and it's going to lead to confusion. So I think putting the tool out there is great, but we need to back that with guidance that stretches across the region.
So, just informally, do the physicians think that capacity is a reasonable next step for a stroke assessment to be used by EMS? Fairly?
I don't.
I'm gonna forget, so hold on.
You have.
So can I?
Oh, so our next step in theory would be the nuts and bolts of what a protocol, the educational format, and all the potential ramifications would look like? Is that a reasonable thought? Okay, now you.
So can I just, what are the other scores and their comparisons? I mean, I know the race scores to use,
So this is a 2-year-old reference, but this is a table that look at the comparison of pre-hospital stroke severity scale, and they have included CSTAT, or the Cincinnati Stroke Triage Assessment Tool. They have the FAST-ED included here. You have the RACE score, or the Rapid Arterial Occlusion Evaluation. They have the LAPS, or the Los Angeles Pre-Hospital Stroke Screen Motor Scale, the stroke screen, and then they have the motor scale, the LAMS. And then they have the Pre-Hospital Acute Stroke Severity, or the PAS. They also have the VAN, or the Vision Aphasia Neglect. And they have, for comparison, the National Institute of Health Stroke Scale. So they have, again, as I said, this is an old comparison, but they have a fairly representative sample of what scales that have been tried with some validation in the pre-hospital setting.
what did that show?
So the notes, just to give you some, for the CSTAT, they put it at the middle of the road for time to complete the scale compared to others, meaning that it takes a lot more time to do it. FAST-ED, the comment was it's easy to learn and remember, given that many EMS are already familiar with the FAST. For the RACE, it says it's more time consuming. It has the most time needed to complete. For the LAPSS, it's middle of the road also. For PAS score, it's simple and rapid, but no external data set was available for pre-hospital validation. And they have the VAN, which says it is the shortest time needed to complete. It's easy to remember, but it's not yet validated in the pre-hospital setting. So those are the comments from the comparison. So based on the comments from the author, the FAST-ED has one of the easiest to remember, easiest to do, because most of the components are already familiar in the CPSS, and it has the highest accuracy than RACE and CPSS comparing to the NIH stroke scale for the large vessel occlusion assessment.
I just want to say something in regards to Mitch's thing, because I think that's an important thing. I think it's important for us just to keep this in perspective of what exactly this is, and what we're trying to accomplish here. We currently have a stroke score that we use on every potential stroke patient. This is just going to be something additional to capture patients that we otherwise wouldn't have. What they're going to do with that information is no different than the information that they're going to do if they have a positive Cincinnati stroke score. It's just going to cast the net a little bit wider to pick up strokes that we otherwise wouldn't pick up on the scene. Whatever they do with that information, well, we're not asking them to do any particular changes other than to do what they normally would do in their discussions with med control, especially if they're going to be calling ahead to a facility that's going to be receiving a stroke patient. This will be just information that they can relay to them in their discussions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's the key piece, and I think that needs to be the core emphasis, is that we have more information from the initial action is the same from the provider's perspective.
Okay, so where do we go from here?
I can make a motion to, if you'd like, and then we can have discussion and then a vote.
Okay.
All right. I think my motion is going to be that I would like to implement, let me see. I would like to start the steps to implement the FAST-ED in the region as a regionally approved pre-hospital stroke score to be used in addition to the Cincinnati stroke score, and to look into the development of the education to roll that out.
Okay.
Any wordsmithing would be very much appreciated at this point.
To be used in addition with, or to eventually potentially supersede, or just leave it as addition for now?
At this point, we can't supersede because everybody has to use the pre-hospital or the Cincinnati stroke score, but we can add on additional ones if we can. If that changes, it'll be a change in the protocols.
So is there a second?
This is for protocolizing it. You must do this. Is that the motion? Is the
So
motion
in other
for
words,
protocolizing it? It is, no.
It's a
It's just for
required.
added education. We're talking about added education, letting people know what this means, and then putting that in their toolbox to help them guide where the best destination for their patient is. Is that what we're saying?
Correct. I will read the protocol as it currently reads. Perform a neurologic exam including a Cincinnati stroke scale and other regionally approved and indicated stroke scale. So this will be the and other regionally approved stroke scale. So.
Yeah, you mentioned using it to determine the destination. From the pre-hospital perspective, the paramedics, that should be on medical control, not on the paramedics. I'm just, because that's gonna cause confusion.
Well, it's
and my
the same
role
thing
providers
about
are
whether I'm
getting
gonna go to a cath lab.
But my role providers are already getting caught in the middle
Yep.
of that with trauma, with cath lab, and this will be one more thing they're getting caught in the middle of.
But this is what I'm trying to clarify. Are we telling them, you meet this threshold, you will take this patient to a comprehensive stroke center?
No, all we're doing is the tool itself. So at this point, all we're doing is the tool itself. At this point, we're just saying that we're going to add the tool to the Cincinnati score in order to capture more patients than we otherwise would. That's all.
So
Being
like
a
anything
stickler
else,
for- being a
educate
stickler
your
for
patient.
protocol.
I'd like to take you to Syracuse, and here's why.
There's a piece.
We have a second before we have a discussion. Thank you. Now we can have a discussion.
So I think the way the key points in the protocol will allow is transport the patient to a New York State DOH designated stroke center or consult medical control to discuss an appropriate destination facility. So Dr. Fulger is saying that's in addition to the Cincinnati, but then I think the key will be in the education and rollout it's highlighting these key sections that if this tool is used, the consult with medical control is gonna be a key to this. That it's not a decision by the paramedic to just bypass and go to comprehensive. So I think that piece is gonna have to be really highlighted in the role of this.
Because otherwise you will be getting every stroke because we're not gonna make a decision at this point.
And it's possible that down the line, that this can change, but at this point in time, the protocol isn't gonna change. We're just putting on the stroke scale.
The other verbiage in the protocol that'll be helpful is following local and regional guidelines for triage of stroke patients to centers with endovascular capabilities if available. So besides the education, that may be something this body wants to look at, is besides consulting medical control, is there any other guidelines that we put out with the education? So the nice thing is the protocol is written to allow the local REMAC to add a lot of things to this if needed.
I just think that if we're going to do this, I'm not sure what the point is of educating providers without having an action to follow up with. I think it's just going to be one more thing that's confusing. Maybe one solution would be, as a medical control option, have the criteria of if the FAST-ED score is X, then go to a comprehensive stroke center. But otherwise, I'm not going to do with that. And I don't think, as most of the rural ER medical control physicians are really going to know that either, to be honest. So I think it needs to be black and white on the protocol. Here's the criteria to go. Talk to medical control about it. I don't know what that criteria is, but it must be out there, right? So.
Dr. Word brings a good point since he's down in Cortland, half hour away. So that's the nice piece is you're dealing with multiple agencies that are like 5 minutes from comprehensive.
So at this particular point in time, that information is out there, but nobody agrees on exactly what that is. So I mean, I think at this point we keep it very simple in that we put out the FAST-ED just to identify potential stroke patients that otherwise would not be identifiable by the Cincinnati stroke scale. What you do with those stroke patients, I don't think has been fleshed out and agreed upon throughout all of the individuals yet. And it depends upon local resources, it depends upon a ton of things that's very hard to put within the protocol itself. So one of the things I think that is important based on the presentations that we had here is that there were some patients who were sent to outside facilities where for whatever reason that stroke was not recognized for hours, okay? So the purpose of adding this particular stroke score is, if nothing else, to say, okay, well, I've got a patient here that is Cincinnati negative, but this FAST-ED score says this patient may be having a large vessel occlusion. Maybe we should start whatever ball that you have rolling sooner rather than later. So I think that that's the important thing to Mitch's point, that when we get this out there, you know, why are we doing this? Well, this is why we're doing this. We're not recreating an entire stroke transport system. All we're doing is trying to identify patients that we otherwise wouldn't in order to get the ball rolling, however you normally do it in your system.
I'm not sure I agree with the point of more education about this without telling our providers exactly what to do with it. I think we have more confusion.
You do the same thing that you do with the Cincinnati stroke score. There's no difference.
So what we're saying then, the point of this isn't to go to the comprehensive center.
No.
The point of this is to pick up more strokes.
At this point.
Yeah.
And we're gonna.
I think that's not the point that I heard from our neurology colleagues.
I strongly support that Dr. Fuller's point here that you know, if anything, you know, without changing anything else, adding this more sensitive stroke pre-hospital scale can only help not just the emergency medical technician, but also whoever is going to receive this patient. You know, so I mean, hospitals in the North Country, that we have, been getting patients from, a lot of times, they don't have any choice but to bring these patients to locals, because, they don't have a way, to come to upstate. But if they have, both the EMS and them able to capture these patients who, are requiring more intervention, the ability for them to be able to send them, much sooner rather than later, and to be able to call for help much sooner rather than later, to me would be a good improvement to the current process of yes, some hospitals not identifying them until later. So if we didn't do anything with our system of kind of like transporting patients, I think if anything, it will improve our ability to be on a heightened alert to patients with stroke who might otherwise be treated differently if we didn't know that they're having this type of stroke. And yes, it's in the ideal setting, it would be good to have a system of regional transport practices where all these patients can be readily transported. But currently we don't have that. We only have like one or two air medical transport, and half of the year they're not able to fly because of the weather. And so more likely than not, these patients will likely be end up in the local facility also, even if we have this kind of like comprehensive system where oh, you have this score, they have to go there, you have to bypass. In reality, very few kind of like or not a big number will be able to be transported directly from the field, and so they will be in the local facility. But having a more heightened awareness of this more serious stroke can allow them to to quickly call for help, so that they can be all the other supportive care that is required for these patients, like maybe having their blood pressure a little bit higher and not giving the blood pressure medication, giving them oxygen, and preparing for transport. Not letting the ambulance who brought the patient go away, but like having them wait until the patient has to be ready for transport. I think that would be so I think we're not going to be solving the transport kind of like system here, but having another level of information can help both the local providers to be aware of these patients, that can help these patients to be transported very quickly, since we don't have that capacity yet to kind of like bring them directly to the comprehensive stroke center at this point. So having those additional information will more likely than not help to expedite the care of these patients.
I'm just going to quickly concur with that. I have a perfect example. We had a patient the other day from the North Country, was identified as a stroke, but we didn't have a good severity index because of the tool lacking. The patient was flown via fixed-wing aircraft to Hancock and then was driven here. It took 3 hours and 40 minutes for a large vessel occlusion for them to hit our door. And at that point, we did the TPA, we did the mechanical thrombectomy. The NIH being 25 on arrival went down to about a 14. But that's a perfect example of what Dr. Latore was saying, is that the severity was never indicated nor communicated. So we knew it when they hit our door, but the patient had to go from a EMS rig to a local hospital to a fixed wing aircraft to another hospital, and that was all without knowing. We didn't have any idea how severe this patient was.
So how would this change any of that?
So
Since it wouldn't change anything. So if the EMS knows the score, they go to the local hospital, nothing changes.
So the question would be, and to Dr. Latore's point, is there a savings of time in the activation of these Mercy Flight, of the different flight centers. You know, I don't know the answer to that, you know, in this specific
I'm the
case.
director for Mercy Flight, so
Yeah.
I can tell you, I mean.
Yeah, I don't know the answer
is
in
the
this
local
specific case.
hospital. It sounds like these interventions need to be directed to the local EDs, not the
Right.
EMS providers. And I'm struggling with a score that has a likelihood ratio of 5, which was not been discussed yet. But quite honestly, is not as well performing as I think everyone's telling you that to be.
Why do we do the Cincinnati pre-hospital strokes in the field then? Why don't we just transport the patients who we think might be having a stroke to a facility and just let the ED decide if it's going to be a stroke or not?
Well, because, I mean, we have, I don't think you're asking the same question. We're trying to identify a stroke or not. And now we're trying to talk about, you know, a particular type of stroke that, you know, is not properly, you know, a large vessel occlusion versus some other type of stroke that's not identified by this tool.
No, we're trying to pick up strokes that aren't picked up on the Cincinnati pre-hospital stroke score.
Then why, okay, so, but that's not, is that what the score is doing?
Yeah, I think the data shows,
I would disagree. Do you think a likelihood ratio of 5 is reasonable?
I think compared to, or in addition to the Cincinnati, yes, it is increasing the sensitivity as well as the validity and reliability of that tool.
I would disagree with that. It's fine.
So the only other thing I think I'm going to add at this point is that when we were discussing the protocols, I think amongst all of the folks in the state, there was a consensus that there were significant limitations on the Cincinnati score. We needed something in addition to the Cincinnati score. In the protocol, it says that you're going to do the Cincinnati score plus a regionally approved stroke score, which we currently don't have. The specific one is left up to the region because of the differing opinions out there. I just got back confirmation. Albany currently uses the FAST ED. I haven't heard back from Jeremy Cushman from Rochester yet, but I think that they do too. So, if you don't want to do the FAST ED, we're going to have to pick something else.
Hi. So, if the question is, can we add the FAST ED to the protocol? I don't think anybody's objecting. I think everyone's problem here is it's not going to solve your problems. Realize that. So education to the outside facilities, the docs there and the ED is going to really help your problem because they're going to have to recognize it faster. It's not the EMS. The EMS brings a patient to the outside facility. I can just see this happening. Well, I think he's having a stroke because blah, blah, and they're like, leave it be. That's the problem you're identifying. The way to the identification, which is a provider problem at the outside facility. But you still want those people that go to those facilities sometimes to get GPA and care there all the way. They don't have to come to a comprehensive center. So this won't solve the problem. It's going to take a comprehensive approach to the problem if you want to solve it. This will identify maybe a couple more strokes, and locally that could bring them to our facility or to your facility, which is okay. But I don't think it's going to change things in Potsdam, New York, or Ogdensburg, New York, and Claxton, Edward, or EJ Noble, Governor. Those patients are still going to go there, and if we don't educate the providers that are at those hospitals, the MDs or the DOs or whatever they have, whatever have you, then you're going to have problems still.
I think your point is valid, and I think that Josh and Oksana and Dr. Latour and myself, we spent an inordinate amount of time trying to do that. So I agree with you. Absolutely.
So we have a motion on the floor to essentially add the FAST ED with the full grade education, etc., to the current and existing protocols. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, I will call for a vote. And the vote is as the motion was stated. So all those in favor?
Dr. Remack free to not use that directive?
Nope.
Okay. Governor Remack that we have to do this education for each agency.
Isn't it beneficial to the patient and to the provider?
What's that?
Wouldn't it be beneficial to the provider and the
No, I'm not having a discussion again, I'm just asking, I don't wanna have a discussion again, I'm just asking, as an individual agency medical director, am I free to not have education for my agency?
Chris wants something else to do it.
So that's what I'm, simple question.
Dr. Folger, you and I spun the collaborative. My understanding is if we approve this, it's regional, not agency specific.
Correct.
That's my understanding.
Yes, it's regional. Okay, any other light discussions? The remainder of the evening? Or are we gonna call it quits? Any other new business, old business, anything else for the good of the order? Then I guess we can entertain a motion to adjourn. 1, 2, 3. Drive safe, happy holidays. Be careful